Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to this session of the Srimad Bhagavatam overview. Today we are moving on to the 6th chapter of the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayet. Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langhayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamham Mande Sri Gurudina Tarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Dinamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadibhas Chatideshatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhanityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gauravakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So the discussion between Vidura and Maitreya is continuing from the 5th chapter, and 6th chapter is actually a continuation of the 5th chapter. So here we go. So in 5th chapter, actually Maitreya started describing about the process of creation, and then he spoke about the 23 elements, and then he started talking about those devatas who manifested as part of the initial creation, and then their prayers, etc. So that is how that chapter was concluded. And in the 6th chapter, totally there are 40 slokas. So the 6th chapter basically speaks about the development of that universal form, and then the manifestation of the different demigods from that universal form, then the development of various planets, living entities and varnas. And then the end of the chapter is where all the nectar is there. From the sloka 35 to 40, Maitreya Muni explains how unworthy he feels to describe the unlimited glories of the Supreme Lord. So that is the, what shall we say, substance of this chapter, so to say. So the universal creation, that is the 23 elements, Mahatattva, Ahankara, the 5 Tanmatras, 5 gross elements, 10 senses, and the mind, they were all existing in an unmixed state, and because they were in an unmixed state, the creative activities were suspended. And the controlling deities of all these elements offered prayers to the Lord. That is what we saw towards the end of the 5th chapter. And then beginning of 6th chapter is where Maitreya Muni is describing how Lord Karnodagashayi Vishnu is answering the prayers by entering into the universe as Garbhodagashayi Vishnu and manifesting the Virat Rupa. So, as I said, the beginning of this chapter is basically how the universal form is getting developed, So, beginning, Rishi Maitreya said, the Lord thus heard about this of the progressive creative functions of the universe due to the non-combination of his potencies, such as the Mahatattva. Then the Supreme Lord simultaneously entered into the 23 elements with goddess Kali, his external energy, who alone amalgamates all the different elements. So here he is explaining how the cohesive energy of the Lord, which amalgamates all the different elements, and after this he entered into that universal Anda, as Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. Then all the living entities, including the Devatas, became enlivened as if awakening from sleep. Thus, set into action by the will of the Lord, the 23 elements produce the gigantic universal form, Adi Purusha or Vishwarupa or Virat Purusha, for all planetary systems and all movable and immovable creations. So, first, there is Karnodakashaya Vishnu, and then after Karnodakashaya Vishnu, Lord enters into the universe as Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and only then everything becomes enlivened. This actually gets explained in the second canto also. In the 5th chapter, we will see, 5th or 4th or 5th, yeah, 5th chapter, 2nd canto, we will see Brahma speaking the same thing to Narada Muni. That same discussion is getting replicated in 3rd canto, chapter 6, where Maitreya Muni is talking to Vidura. So, there is actually this gap of time between the Lord's first Purushavatara as Karnodakashaya Vishnu, and then the Lord accepting the second Purushavatara as Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. That Prabhupada is explaining in the purports also to these verses, And then, as the Lord in his plenary portion entered into the elements of the universal creation, they transformed into the gigantic form in which all planetary systems and all movable and immovable creations rest. The gigantic Virat Purusha, known as Hiranmaya, lived for 1,000 celestial years on the water of the universe, and all the living entities lay with him. Hiranmaya Sapurushaha Sahasra Parivatsaran Andakosha Upavas Uvasapsu Sarvasatvo Paribrim Sarvasatvopa Brahmhitaha. Prabhupada explains in the purport that after the Lord entered each and every universe as Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, half of the universe was filled with water. The cosmic manifestation is only half of the complete universe, and before the manifestation takes place, after the entrance of Vishnu within the universe, there is a period of 1,000 celestial years. All living entities injected within the womb of the Mahatattva are divided in all the universe with the incarnation of Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and all of them lie down with the Lord until Brahma is born. You see? So that is what I said, that there is this time gap between Karnodakashaya Vishnu and Garbhodakashaya Vishnu creating everything after Brahma and then the creation. So there is a 1,000 celestial year gap that is there. Okay, and then the Virat Purusha, the 7th shloka, the total energy of the Mahatattva in the form of the gigantic Virat Rupa divided himself by himself into the consciousness of the living entities, the life of activity and self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. So what is this 1, 10, and 3? That is the Virat Purusha consisting of Mahatattva, divided himself into Jiva Shakti, that is a consciousness of the living entities. Then Prana Shakti, that is a life air. And Atma Shakti, which is the self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. Okay, and this Virat Purusha is the first avatara of Garbhodaya Sai Vishnu and is a self of unlimited living entities that all rest in him. And in the 9th sloka is explaining what is that 1, 10, and 3. So the gigantic universal form is represented by 3. What is that? Adhyatma, Adhideva, and Adibhuta. That is, Adhyatma is the subtle senses, Adhideva is the controlling demigods, Adibhuta is the gross organs along with sense objects. And 10 is representing the 10 kinds of life energy. And 1 is the heart where the life energy is generated from. So this is the 1, 10, and 3. Okay, so that gets explained there. And then Lord, remembering the prayers of the demigods, saw that the creative functions are suspended. The elements are in an unmixed state. So he sends his energy and amalgamates everything, and that forms a golden universal egg. That golden universal egg, like a fetus, with all the living entities resided for 1000 celestial years in the Karana ocean. Then Garbhodaya Sai Vishnu entered into that golden universal egg and gave it life. All the living entities, including the Devatas, were enlivened as if awakening from sleep. Prabhupada speaks about this, that the living entities, when they move from one body to another, they spend only a very short time in between, But when the dissolution takes place at the end of the life of Brahma, then the living entities actually spend millions of years in an inert situation. And then Lord, by his causeless mercy, this Prabhupada explains elsewhere that Lord, by his causeless mercy, decides, to create again. So on one hand, this may look as if the Lord is having some kind of fun, It may look like that, no? So, okay, I am helpless. I could not come out of this Janana Marana Chakra. And then, okay, when it comes to Brahma's end of life, then I don't know for how long I'll have to be in it. This is for a conditioned living entity, this is his position. But Srila Prabhupada explains that the Lord, again, after millions of years, this living entity spends in an inert stage. The Lord decides to enliven him and all the such many living entities together, so that again they will get an opportunity. Why? To go back home, back to God. So every time we think about this creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the Lord, we should look at it in that positive sense and not in that negative, I am helpless, what can I do kind of sense. Because sometimes when we read, we get this understanding that, okay, so what is to be done? He does according to, he is supremely independent. He does according to his will and pleasure and whatnot. And then again, he will make me unmanifest, and what am I to do? Like that. But no, that is not the case. That is not the case. Every time the Lord is acting, he is acting for the welfare of the living entity. So this principle is to be seen and understood even in this Srishti and dissolution Leela of the Lord. How the Lord is creating and how this whole thing is taking place. So this is how the Lord is once again doing this creation. And Prabhupada also speaks about this 10 manifestations of this life energy, Prana Shakti. Those are actually the 10 Vayus, Prana Vayu, Apana Vayu, Samana Vayu, Udana Vayu, Vyana Vayu, then Naga Vayu, Krikara Vayu, Kurma Vayu, Devadatta Vayu, and Dhananjaya Vayu. These are the 10 life airs. So the Prana Vayu is that air that is moving through the nose in breathing. Apana Vayu is the air that moves through the rectum as evacuated bodily air. Samana Vayu is the one that adjusts food in stomach and the sound of belching that is created by the Samana Vayu. Udana Vayu is that air that moves through the throat, and stopping of Udana Vayu causes suffocation. Vyana, this is the Vayu, that total air that circulates throughout the body. Then Naga is the name of that Vayu that facilitates the opening of eyes, mouth, etc. Krikara Vayu is that which increases appetite. Kurma Vayu helps contraction. Devadatta helps relaxation by opening the mouth wide in yawning. That is Devadatta. Dhananjaya is that Vayu that helps sustenance of the body. So we also understand what an important part Vayu plays, in a living entity's life. And this Vayu is the one that acts from the time of birth until the time of death. And the yogi actually, the yogic process is such that by simply controlling this Vayu, only the yogi is able to live through the, top of his head. That is how is he bringing himself up to that level is by this Vayu movement. In fact, a baby is born in the natural way also by the push of the Vayu inside the body system only. That is why we will see that in Ayurveda, in all treatments, they are trying to stabilize, or they are trying to bring into equilibrium your Vayu, Kapha and Pitta. No? That is the 3 basic things in the body. If they are in equilibrium, you are healthy. If any one of them is out of equilibrium, you are unhealthy. So that is why as part of Srishti, this is also there. So that it is so important that it plays a very important role for the living entity. And that is also why the Ashtanga Yoga process is giving so much importance to this air, so Vayu. That is very, very important. And then Maitreya Muni says, now hear from me how the Lord separated himself into the forms of the demigods. How? Through the different locations, from the 12th shloka to the 26th shloka. It speaks about, there is the gross organ, then the Adidevata, or the Devata who is in charge of that sense, and then the what you call the sense object or the activity. So that is actually the Adibhuta, Adideva. So from the mouth of the Virat Purusha, Agni comes. Along with that sound or voice. So it is with that voice or that vachas that we are able to speak. Okay. And the palate, from that comes Varuna. And Varuna is connected with what? Water. Water is connected with what? Taste. So the sense organ is tongue, and Jihva is what helps us to taste everything. And then the nostrils. Ashwini Kumara are the controlling deity of the nostril. And so the Grana Shakti is controlled by the Ashwini Kumaras, and that helps us to smell everything. And then eyes, Akshini. Surya is the Adidevata for that, and Chakshu is what we use to see everything. And then Charma or skin, and the Adidevata for that is Anila or Vayu, and the sense organ is skin, because touch, we already know that Vayu, what is the sense connected with Vayu is the sense of touch, so Vayu, then touch. Then ears, Karna, your ears. The Dig Devatas are the controlling deity, and the hearing principle or Srotra, that is the subtle sense organ, that helps us to hear different sounds. The purport of this shloka, Srila Prabhupada very elaborately states how ears are the most important sense organs for the living entity. Why? Because Shruti. Shruti, no? Shruti means what? Hearing. Veda is Shruti, to be heard. That means one can actually understand the entire truth about the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply by hearing. And this can be, I can give you one example. It may not be very, you may not think it may be appropriate, not appropriate, I don't know. But I don't know how many of you have heard of a great saint by name Ramabhadracharya. He is still a living saint in North India, and he's a Vaishnava. He's a Ramanandi Vaishnava, and he's blind from birth. He's blind from birth, but if you hear him speak about Lord Ramachandra, then we understand why eyes are not required to understand the Supreme Personality of God. He's, to me, is a epitome of example of how simply by the Shrotra process one can be, whether you have the eyesight to see or not, doesn't matter. He's blind by birth. But the way he can describe Ayodhya Puri, he will actually take you to Ayodhya. The way he will speak about Sita Devi marrying Lord Ramachandra, you will actually feel that you were there, standing in Mithilapuri in the huge assembly, where Janaka is there and Dasharatha is there and Rama is standing and Sita is standing. So much spiritual inner vision he has got simply by hearing. So simply by hearing, using the sense of hearing, one can actually perfect one's spiritual life. So there are many places in the Srimad Bhagavatam and elsewhere where Srila Prabhupada speaks about why this faculty of hearing is most important for us. That we hear, we retain it, we take it to our heart, then we can actually realize it. So, Srila Prabhupada says that in the purport, how hearing is the most important sense organ as far as the human being is concerned. And then the skin. For the skin, the Ati-devatas are the trees personified. Then for genitals, it is Prajapati. And for the evacuating channel, it is Mitra. So again, these are repetitive because we have already seen this in the second canto in various parts as well. And then for the Hastam, it is Indra. For Padav, it is Upendra. For Buddhi, it is Brahma. For Hridayam, heart, it is Chandra or moon. And for the material ego, it is Rudra. And for consciousness, it is the Mahatattva. And the material ego, Rudra, Prabhupada explains that he is an incarnation of Lord Shiva, and most of the people in the material world who have this Vidya Hankara, they are all under the control of this Rudra. That also Prabhupada mentions in the purport. And then Maitreya continues to explain the Virat Rupa, the head, the head of the Virat Rupa is heavenly planets, and people there are demigods who are, in super Sattva Guna, and the legs are the earthly planets, where human beings are there in Rajoguna. The abdomen part is the Bhuvar Loka, and that is the abdominal part of the Virat Rupa. That is where you will find the associates of Rudra who are in Tamoguna. And then also in the Virat Rupa, how the Varnas are manifesting. So from the mouth manifest the Brahmanas. Brahmanas are the ones who are endowed with Vedic wisdom. So Brahmanas, Vedas, and they are natural teachers and spiritual masters to the society. From the arms of the Virat Rupa, the Kshatriyas emanate, and naturally their role is protection. Thighs of the Virat Rupa, the Vaishyas manifest, and they are the ones who give livelihood to the society, and they produce grains. And the legs are, from the legs manifest Shudras who serve for perfection of Dharma. So their role is to satisfy the Lord by service. So all the Varnas, along with their occupational duties, are born from the Lord. Everyone has to worship the Lord under the direction of Guru. This also is said in the 34th shloka of this chapter. All these different social yes. Thus, for unconditional life and self-realization, one has to worship the Supreme Lord under the direction of the spiritual master. Who is saying this? Maitreya Muni is telling Vidura that is very, very important. Shraddhayatma vishuddhyartham yajjata sahavrittibihi ete varna swadharmena yajanti swagurum harim. So one should have a spiritual master under whose direction one should worship Hari, irrespective of Ete Varna. Whichever Varna one may be in, one must have a spiritual master to direct one so that one may worship Hari. And then Maitreya Muni, very humbly, he is speaking about how unfit he is. O Vidura, who can estimate or measure the transcendental time, work, and potency of the gigantic form manifested by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? He says it is practically, who can do it? Etat kshattar bhagavato deva karmatma rupina kasraddhadyat upakartum yogamaya balodayam. So it is everything is manifesting by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So who can actually measure? Vidura, Maitreya is asking or telling to Vidura. Tathapi kirtayamyanga yatha mati yatha srutam kirtim hare swam satkartum giram anyabhidashatim. In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master, and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in the glorification of the Lord by pure speech. For otherwise, my power of speaking would remain unchaste. Very, very important for us to understand that whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech. For otherwise, my power of speaking would remain unchaste. That is, as long as I don't use my power of speech to glorify that person who alone is worthy of glorification, then my power of speech is like a Vaishya, unchaste. Unchaste means what? Vaishya. Vaishya means what? Having more than one master. Correct? Having various patis. Such a person is called a Vaishya. You have more than one Swami. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that if you have more than one Swami, you are Vaishya. When Vallabha Bhatta came to Mahaprabhu and said that, I find some discrepancies in Sridhara Swami's commentary of the Bhagavatam, so I am writing my commentary. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told him that, anybody who is not faithful to Swami is a Vaishya, Mahaprabhu said. What he meant was that anybody who is not faithful to Sridhara Swami's commentary of Srimad Bhagavatam is as good as a Vaishya, because you are not accepting Swami, that one Swami to be accepted. The broader meaning is that one who has more than one Swami is considered to be a Vaishya. That means if I am using my speaking potency to glorify Tom, Dick and Harry, then my speaking potency becomes a Vaishya. Why? Because Vaishya will do anything for money. We also use our tongue to glorify anybody as long as we get money. Right? So that makes our speaking potency unchaste. I am not saying this. Maitreya Muni is saying this. So, Prabhupada there, he mentions that purification of the conditioned soul necessitates purification of his consciousness. By presence of consciousness, presence of the transcendental soul is verified, and as soon as consciousness leaves the body, the material body is not active. Consciousness is perceived, therefore, by activities. The theory put forward by empiric philosophers that consciousness can remain in an inactive state is the proof of their poor fund of knowledge. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. So, the beginning of the purport, Prabhupada says, purification of consciousness. And then Prabhupada goes on to explain that this consciousness is what gives me the confirmation of myself being here. No, I am because I am conscious. If I'm not conscious, I'd be dead. That is why when somebody is unconscious, you don't know anything. That is a temporary kind of death. That is why it is said that sleep is complete ignorance. Why? Because in sleeping, you are not conscious, you don't know anything. Correct? And that going into a permanent sleep is called death. That means consciousness leaves the body. So again, consciousness is of paramount importance. One way to purify the consciousness is to continuously speak and glorify about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, speak about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, speak the names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Consciousness gets purified. So, power of speech should not be left unchaste. It has to be chastened by accepting the one Swami who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and glorify him only. Why? Because he is only one worthy of glorifying. And Maitreya Muni's example is very wonderful. He says that although I am very limited, this is very, very important for us. Although I am very limited by my abilities, I am trying to explain whatever I have assimilated from hearing from my spiritual master to glorify the Supreme Personality of God, so that my consciousness, my power of speech is not unchaste. So, very wonderful shloka. So, this also gives us very clear understanding why we should speak about the Supreme Personality. Although we may be very limited in our understanding, whatever we have assimilated from the spiritual master, we can speak. Otherwise, in various places in the Vedic literature, it says, the tongue, if it is not vibrating for Krishna, chanting Krishna's name, chanting Krishna's glories, it is simply like the croaking of a frog inviting death. The frog opens its mouth and does crom, 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 you know. That is what invites the snake, you know. The frog's crom, crom is like for the devotee, you know, the after offering bell rings, no? Ting, ting, ting. So devotee starts already in the mind, Mahaprasade Govinde. So just like the frog says crom, crom, and the snake starts chanting Mahaprasade because he knows that food is very near to him, like that. You know, so we shouldn't be like, there are many examples of the frog. In this chapter, in the purport itself, in many places, Prabhupada speaks about the frog-like philosophers, you know. And in one purport, Prabhupada explains that, you know, that full story, Prabhupada's favorite story about frog being spoken about. One frog will come and tell him there is an Atlantic Ocean, and this frog will ask, is it so big? Is it so big? You know, frog is expanding itself and finally bursts. And Prabhupada always says that all these frog-like philosophers, what can they understand about the Virat Rupa of the Lord? What can they understand about the unlimited prowess, unlimited potency of the Lord? Nothing they can understand, because they are like frogs. And simply by their croaking of this blasphemous philosophy, they are just, you know, calling death near to them, that's all. Eventually, they will all die and become frogs and hogs and various other things. Anybody who cannot accept the supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, everybody will have a similar fate. So, in many ways, frog is a, you know, guru for all of us, because many times we are like frogs. And then, text 37, Maitreya Muni speaks about what is glorious, you know. Ekantalapam vajasonu pumsam sushlokamauler gunavadamahu shrutescha vidvadbhir upakritayam katha sudhayam upasamprayogam. The highest perfectional gain of humanity is to engage in the discussions of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them. So, again, we are understanding why it is important to hear. You know, why? Because what is the greatest perfectional gain? Is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories. Ekanta labham. You know, ekanta labham means that gain for which there is no comparison. Vachasa, by discussion. Napumsa, after the Supreme Person. Shushloka, pious, maule, activities. So, simply by discussing the activities, discussing the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we can actually get the highest gain, you know. So currently what we are engaged in is actually giving us the highest gain. You know, all other things give us some gain, some temporary gain, some material gain and everything. But all those things will also dissipate and go with time, you know, because in the Mahatattva creation, there is also Kala also is created, no? So he's already playing that part by being there, by leveling everything, by, you know, bringing everything down. So all other gains that we get will be impacted by that. But this gain, Ekanta Labham, that Labham, that will, you know, it's second to none. That kind of labham, that kind of gain we are getting simply by engaging in discussion and hearing. So actually the purpose of the year is to stay close to discussions of Srimad Bhagavatam. That way this becomes purified. The sense of hearing and the hearing process and the speaking process becomes purified by speaking and hearing about the Supreme Personality. Through that process, the heart also gets purified. And through that process, the consciousness becomes purified. And as I said, consciousness is a manifestation of who? Of me. So at our level where we are, where we understand that I am, I am there, I know that because of my consciousness. So how do I purify myself? Is by purifying my consciousness. So that is why this consciousness principle is of paramount importance to us. So however many times we repeat about purifying our consciousness, it is very good. We must know that. And Maitreya Muni also says that it is put very nicely in writing by the learned. So that also means we simply we don't have to write new Bhagavatam. We don't have to write new Bhagavad Gita. We simply have to hear what is already given. So this also very clearly gives us the understanding, because Maitreya, this is spoken by Maitreya. And Maitreya is one of the great rishis. Rishi means, he was previously, he would have studied, he's a jnani, he's a speculator, he's a tattva, expounder, everything he is. So he would know all the things. And Maitreya probably could write another entire grantha, but he says that's not necessary. The great learned sages have already put it down, we simply have to follow it. You understand? This is spoken by Maitreya in so much of humility, we must understand. With so much humility, Maitreya is saying it is already given by the great sages, simply we give ear to that. So we don't have to write our own book to prove that I am a great Pandit. And then Maitreya says that even for Brahma, after meditating for 1000 years, he could not understand. He could not understand. Atmano vasito vatsa mahima kavinadina samvatsara sahasrante dhiya yoga vipakkaya. The original point, Brahma, after mature meditation for 1000 celestial years, could know only that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable. After meditating Sahasra Divya Samvatsara, what did he understand? He understood that the glories of the Lord is inconceivable. So it takes Brahma 1000 celestial years of meditation to understand that the glories of the Lord is inconceivable. So what to speak of us? And this is that same Brahma to whom the Lord gave shake hand directly, personally. That Brahma who can actually ask doubt directly to that Supreme Lord who is the origin of all the knowledge. Because Brahma has no other guru. Brahma is like the first living entity and he has directly received it from the Lord. So whom do you think Brahma will go and ask his doubt from? Directly from the Lord. But for him, after 1000 celestial years of meditation, he understood that, he cannot be understood. That is the understanding he got. All the other great personalities also, they keep on saying that we understand that we cannot understand. So Maitreya is repeating that here, after discussing in very much detail about how the Lord creates and how this happens, how that happens, and they say this whole thing is inconceivable. And Maitreya says, even for the great jugglers, the wonderful potency of the Lord is bewildering. And even the self-sufficient Lord himself cannot know it, then what to speak of this? Maitreya is saying, even the Lord cannot fully understand. Which is actually a very funny statement. How can it be that the Lord cannot fully understand? This is the typical atheist question, Can God create something that he cannot destroy? They will ask you very smartly. So Prabhupada said, yes, God can create something that he cannot destroy, and then he will destroy it. You know, for some time he will show as if he cannot destroy, then he will destroy it. So this is the Supreme Lord. And here Maitreya is saying, adding to his statement, that the potency of the Lord is so inconceivable, the Lord himself does not know. You know? And words, mind, and ego, with their respective controlling demigods, have failed to achieve success in knowing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So therefore, we simply have to offer our respectful obeisances unto him as a matter of sanity. So he says, knowing so much, what best we can do is offer our obeisances to the Lord. You know? So we should not think that simply somebody is surrendering and falling at the lotus feet of the Lord. Okay, he doesn't know anything. He has gone and surrendered. He just wants all his problems to be sorted out. No. These great personalities, they are discussing so much of philosophy that is completely going above our head. And finally, they are saying the summum bonum of all these things is to understand that he is inconceivable, and therefore we must, for the sake of sanity, we must surrender unto his lotus feet by paying obeisances. You know, so this is how this chapter gets concluded by Maitreya Muni in the discussion with Vidura. And next chapter also, Vidura's questions will continue. So we will continue then. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.